The morning my husband was buried, the sky was heavy with gray clouds, the kind that press low and make it hard to breathe. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at a woman I barely recognized. My eyes were swollen, my face pale, my hands trembling as I adjusted the black scarf around my neck. 6 days earlier, I had been holding my husband's hand in a hospital room, begging him not to leave me. Now I was preparing to say goodbye forever. Aris had been my everything. He was the calm in my storms, the gentle voice that reminded me I was stronger than I believed. Even during his illness, when pain hollowed his cheeks and stole his energy, he still smiled at me like I was home. When he passed away, the world didn't stop, but mine did. The funeral was scheduled for noon. Friends and relatives began arriving early, their faces full of sympathy, their voices low and careful. I nodded, accepted hugs, murmured thank yous, all while my eyes kept drifting to my phone. I was waiting for one thing only, a call from my parents saying they were on their way. They had promised they would come. As the minutes passed, my phone stayed silent, no missed calls, no messages. Just a blank screen reflecting my own anxious face. I told myself they might be driving, that traffic could be bad, that they would arrive any moment and hold me the way parents are supposed to hold their grieving child. At 11:30, my chest tightened with panic. I stepped away from the crowd and finally called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice unusually bright. "Yes," she said, as if I were interrupting something pleasant. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The funeral is about to start." There was a pause, then laughter in the background. Children's voices, music. "Oh," she said casually, "we're at your cousin's place. It's her daughter's birthday today." I felt dizzy. "You're aware, it's a big party," she continued. "The whole family is here. We couldn't just leave." My heart pounded painfully. "Mama," I said slowly, "this is Aris's funeral. My husband is being buried today." She sighed, annoyed. "What do you want us to do? The party was planned weeks ago, and honestly, what difference does it make? He's already gone." Her words struck me harder than any scream could have. Before I could respond, my father took the phone. "Don't create drama," he said firmly. "Be strong, we'll talk later." The line went dead. I stood there frozen, the phone slipping from my hand. The noise around me blurred into a distant echo. In that moment, something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. It was the sound of trust breaking. When the funeral began, I stood beside Aris's grave alone. Friends stood on one side, co-workers on the other. Someone handed me a tissue, someone else whispered a prayer. But the two people who gave me life weren't there to see me bury the man who gave my life meaning. As the final prayers were recited and soil was placed over his grave, my knees nearly gave out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask my parents how a birthday cake could matter more than my pain. But no words came. That night, I returned to an empty house that no longer felt like home. Aris's shoes were still by the door. His mug sat in the sink. I collapsed onto the floor and cried until my body ached. I didn't call my parents. I didn't argue. I didn't beg for an explanation. Something had shifted inside me that day. The girl who believed her parents would always choose her was buried alongside her husband, and they didn't even come to say goodbye. Grief doesn't disappear after the funeral. It settles in quietly, like dust in an abandoned room, coating everything no matter how often you try to clean. The days after Aris's burial blurred together sunrise, sunset, sleepless nights, and mornings where getting out of bed felt like an impossible task. The world expected me to move on, but I was still standing in that graveyard, watching the soil fall onto the love of my life. The house was unbearably quiet. I no longer heard Aris humming while making tea or laughing at his own terrible jokes. Every object held a memory, and every memory reopened the wound. Sometimes I would reach for my phone to call him, forgetting for a split second that he was gone forever. That second was enough to break me again. My parents called 2 days after the funeral. I watched my phone vibrate on the table, their name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer, not because I was angry. Anger requires energy. I was simply empty. I had nothing left to say to them. They left a message, Why are you ignoring us? My mother demanded. We're still your parents. I deleted the voicemail without listening to it again. Weeks passed, then months. I returned to work because staying home felt like suffocating. At the office, people treated me gently, offering help without asking for explanations. That kindness felt foreign compared to the coldness I had received from my own blood. During lunch breaks, I would sit alone, staring out the window, reminding myself to breathe. At night, grief visited me like an unwanted guest. I cried silently into my pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear. I talked to Aries in the dark, telling him about my day, about the small victories like cooking without burning the food, or surviving another day without him. Sometimes I imagined he was listening. My parents sent messages every few weeks. Why won't you talk to us? We didn't mean to hurt you. You're being unfair. Their words felt hollow. They spoke as if my pain were an inconvenience, something I should have gotten over by now. They never said the words I needed most. We were wrong, so I chose silence. Silence became my shield. In that quiet, I began to hear my own voice again, the one I had ignored for years, while trying to please everyone else. I started therapy, something Aries had always encouraged me to do. Each session was painful, but it taught me that choosing myself wasn't selfish. I sold the house we had shared. Packing Aris's belongings was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I kept his watch, his favorite book, and a faded photograph of us taken on a rainy evening, both of us laughing for no reason at all. I moved into a small apartment with sunlight pouring through the windows, a place that felt less like a tomb and more like a beginning. On the balcony, I planted flowers. It felt symbolic proof that something could grow even in broken soil. Every morning I watered them and whispered Aris's name like a prayer. 6 months passed without me seeing my parents. Then one night my phone rang. It was past midnight. My mother's name lit up the screen again. This time I answered. Her voice was frantic, shaking. Your father collapsed, she cried. The doctors say it was a stroke. We don't know what will happen. I closed my eyes. A strange calm washed over me. We need you, she begged. Please don't abandon us. The word abandon echoed painfully in my chest. I thought of the cemetery, the cold earth, the empty space beside me where my parents should have stood. I didn't abandon you, I said quietly. I just learned how to survive without you. When I ended the call, my hands were steady. For the first time in months, I felt something other than grief. I felt strength growing in the silence they had created. I didn't rush to the hospital that night. After ending the call, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the soft glow of the city lights outside my window. For months I had lived in survival mode, breathing, working, sleeping, repeating. Now, for the first time since Aris's death, I was being asked to choose how I would respond, not out of obligation, but out of strength. The next morning, I went, but on my terms. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and fear, a scent I knew too well. Walking through the long white corridors brought back memories of holding Aris's hand as machines beeped around him. My chest tightened, but I kept walking. I had already survived this once. My mother saw me first. Her face crumpled with relief the moment our eyes met. She rushed toward me, her hands trembling as she held my arms. I didn't think you would come, she whispered. I didn't think you would come to my husband's funeral either. I replied gently, not pulling away, but not embracing her either. She had no answer. My father lay in the hospital bed, half conscious, his once strong presence reduced to shallow breaths and tired eyes. Tubes and wires surrounded him, a quiet reminder of how fragile life truly is. When he saw me, tears slipped from the corners of his eyes. I was wrong, he said weakly. I didn't understand your pain. I looked at him for a long moment. For months, I had imagined this conversation, imagined shouting, accusing, demanding apologies. But standing there, I felt no anger, only clarity. You didn't have to understand, I said softly. You just had to show up. My mother began to cry openly now. We didn't think you needed us, she sobbed. You always seemed so strong. I almost laughed at the irony. I was strong because I had to be, I said, not because I wanted to be. They told me how lonely the last 6 months had been without me, how my silence had hurt them, how they had realized my absence felt like punishment. I listened without interrupting, noticing how familiar the role felt, me absorbing their emotions, comforting them even now. But this time something was different. "I'm not here to punish you," I said calmly, "and I'm not here to fix anything." My mother looked at me in confusion. "Then why did you come?" I took a deep breath for closure, and because I needed you to see me, not as your daughter who forgives everything, but as a woman who knows her worth. The room fell silent. I loved my husband. I continued, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "When you chose a birthday party over his funeral, you told me where I stood in your priorities. I believed you." My father closed his eyes, tears rolling freely now. "Please don't leave us," he whispered. "We need you." I nodded slowly, and I needed you 6 months ago. That truth hung between us, heavy and undeniable. I stayed for an hour. I spoke kindly but honestly. I didn't raise my voice or demand apologies. I didn't need them anymore. When I stood to leave, my mother grabbed my hand. "Will you come back?" she asked, fear etched into her face. "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "Healing doesn't follow a schedule." As I walked out of the hospital, the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. I inhaled deeply, feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time, the power had shifted, not because I had taken revenge, but because I had reclaimed myself. And that, I realized, was something no one could ever take from me again. I didn't return to my parents' house after the hospital visit. Instead, I went back to my apartment, to the quiet space I had carefully built piece by piece after Ariz's death. The flowers on my balcony were in full bloom now, their colors bright against the soft morning light. I stood there for a long time, holding my coffee, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest piece. For months, I had believed revenge meant making others feel the pain they caused me, but standing alone in that calm silence, I understood the truth. Real revenge wasn't cruelty or punishment, it was growth. It was becoming someone who no longer needed validation from the people who failed her. My parents called often after that day. At first, I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because I needed space to protect the fragile balance I had created for myself. When I finally did pick up, the conversations were different, quieter, careful. They asked how I was instead of telling me how I should feel. They listened more than they spoke. Apologies came slowly, awkward and imperfect. We were selfish, and my mother said one evening, her voice trembling, "We didn't realize how deeply we hurt you." I closed my eyes and thought of Ariz's kindness, his belief that love should never cost you your dignity. "I accept your apology," I replied, "but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then a soft, broken "we understand." I visited them weeks later, not as the daughter who rushed to fix everything, but as a woman who set boundaries. I stayed for tea, not for guilt. When the conversation turned heavy, I excused myself without explanation. Leaving no longer felt like abandonment, it felt like self-respect. My father recovered slowly. Watching him learn to walk again reminded me of my own journey. We were both relearning how to live after loss, but on different paths. He reached for my hand once and said, "I wish I had been there for you." "I wish that too," I replied gently. I didn't need more than that. Life moved forward in quiet ways. I started volunteering at a grief support group, sitting beside people who knew the same hollow ache I once carried alone. I spoke about Aris openly without breaking. His memory no longer drowned me, it guided me. On the anniversary of his death, I went to the cemetery alone. I placed fresh flowers on his grave and sat beside it, telling him everything about the apartment, the flowers on the balcony, the strength I never knew I had. They begged me to come back. I whispered, smiling softly, but I didn't lose myself this time. The wind brushed against my face like a gentle touch. I took it as his answer. When I stood to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "We're proud of you." For the first time, those words didn't define me. They didn't heal me or hurt me. They were simply words. I walked away from the grave with steady steps, the past no longer chained to my feet. Betrayal had changed me, yes, but it hadn't destroyed me. It had refined me. My sweet revenge was not their regret. It was my peace, and that peace hard, earned and deeply deserved, was mine to keep forever.